part 2 of the post-flop buckets. This is a little bit of an interesting pot, I think, because I think it was a 3-bet pot that then the 3-better checked out of position. I want to go back and look at it. Okay, this is a 3-bet, always. And I raised to just a little more than 3 times his bet from in position. This player too does a lot of calling on my left. He's fishy. I'm gonna put him in here as I can't color code him, so I can't do anything. I guess I can't put any notes on him. Hello, I got action. Okay, this one's in bucket 1. I have to decide what's a good bet to make here. I'm gonna bet half pot. I was deciding between half pot and 2/3 pot. Unfortunately, I didn't get action there. Really hoping, it's great when you flop a set. You prefer it to not be top set because you don't want to block top pair, which is the most likely hand pretty much on every board that can give you action. Okay, if either of these guys raises, I'm re-raising pure with 10s. I would re-raise with 7s or better pure. So we go to a little more than 4x out of position. Get it to $13. And a 4-bet is tricky if we face a 4-bet, but okay, 8-4 suited. Not quite strong enough, almost strong enough to raise from the button. I used to raise this hand, all suited straighters from the button, but looking at solver charts and stuff showed me that I was doing it a little too much. I was not doing it enough with high card suited hands like Jack 4 suited is just better than the suited straighter hand, or it's pretty close. Jack 6 suited definitely is, and so I was giving a little too much value to those hands, and I decided to cut the weakest ones out. So like the 7-3 suited, 8-4 suited, 9-5 suited. Those hands, I don't play them anymore. I used to play them from the button, but as computers have helped, they've I guess shown a little bit more. Like the computer plays really loosely, but it still favors some of these higher card hands. That's something I was wanting to talk about a little bit. It's just that even though, like in No Limit, flushes and straights and everything are exciting, and they get a lot of our attention, the game is really revolves around pairs. And what I mean by that is it's always the most likely something that matches the board. Okay, so this is a hand where I want to 4-bet this hand as a bluff, like 50% of the time, and I rolled a 40, so I'm going to. Oh, but I timed out. Well, that might have. Ace 4, Ace 5, Ace 8 are the 4-bet bluffs. This is one of the few hands. This is heads up, and heads up is not. I love heads up play, but it isn't. It doesn't. It's a whole different set of strategies and stuff. So unless people jump in real quick, wow, just a few of the. I raise almost 100% of hands from the button, but the few that I don't raise are like the ones with a deuce or a 3 and a middling card offsuit. So it looks like it's not filling up. So I'm going to find another table to record more video. I'll give this guy the button and then I will stand up. This hand can be 3-bet or called. I flopped huge to it. I'm going to check raise. Now I'm going to bet small. Fuck. And my hand is amazing. Although, you know, yeah. Now I'm going to pretend like I don't like this card, and so I'm going to bet small again and hope that he raises, in which case I will just call. I made a fake blocking bet. Okay, find another table. Whoa. Scrolling too fast. There we go. There's one. So that table went well. That, in general, I think the way that modern poker is played is before the river, so on the flop and turn, players have just one bet size for a given texture. So they have, like, if the board is rainbow or two-tone and not connected enough to make a straight. Okay, this is an interesting question. This one is quite close. First hand at the table. I will 3-bet. I'll just make the standard play. Stands right in the bottom of my 3-betting range. Anyway, what I was trying to say was it's common to have one bet size on a given texture. So like on a paired texture, you usually bet small. So like on the flop, it might be I bet 1/3 pot if the board is paired. I bet half pot if the board is semi-connected or disconnected. And I bet, one second here, I'm going to randomize and I'm going to raise 50% of the time here. Yep. This is the kind of hand that is blind versus blind is a whole complicated thing. Okay, so this is a bucket 2 hand. Okay, I'm going to bet, and actually I'm not even going to bet. There's not many overcards that can come. I don't need to protect my hand. I have a backdoor flush draw and a backdoor straight draw, so these cards don't bother me as much. I could definitely induce a a worse hand to bet, either as a bluff or because he like turned a 10 or he has an 8. Any number of things that are any good number of good things can happen. Now I made a bad flush, and if he bets, I can only beat a bluff, but I have a pretty good bluff catcher. So he limped in. So that makes like the ace of spades, the king of spades, not that likely. He's betting full pot, which is fine. My hand only beats a bluff, you can see. But it's not that likely he has the ace or king of spades, and it's not that likely he bets a worse hand than that for 15 bucks. So he has the king of spades. This hand is well played by both players. Also, you can see that I did induce a bluff. If I bet the flop with the king 9, he most likely would have just folded. And instead, I got him to bet the turn. Now he turned a huge draw. He had like a lot of outs, but even so, I was a pretty good favorite against that at that time. He had 8, 11. He had 14 outs to beat me. So even with that really good draw, 14 outs, he was 32 to 14. So he was more than a 2-1 dog. And I got him to put money in. So now when I was 0% to win, I did pay off a full pot bet. But there's not much I can do about that. A flush is good enough, even though it's only a 6-high flush. It's good enough to call there. Anyway, what I was trying to say is you just have one bet size on a given texture. And basically, the more dynamic the board is, meaning the more likely it is that the nuts can change, the bigger you would bet. So you'd bet like a third or a quarter pot on the paired textures or the textures where a flush is already possible. You bet like a half pot on boards where a straight is possible. And then you might start to bet bigger, 3/4 pot or pot on the semi-connected textures. But you only use that one bet size on the given board, and so you're only so if you're studied enough, you know, okay, this is the bet size I use if I bet on this board, and then you just have to decide, should my hand bet or not? Since you already know the bet size, all you have to do is decide should I bet or not, and that works like that's a pretty good system. It's like a computer has like a lot of different bet sizes, all different frequencies, but you can see that if you force the computer to just pick one bet size, it shows you that the EV that it makes against its opponent doesn't drop very much. So like the change from a perfect strategy with all kinds of bet sizes at different frequencies and just one bet size per board is small. So you don't give up much money by doing it that way. Okay, so this hand against a hijack open wants to 3-bet 1/4 of the time, and I got no, so I fold. And I die a little inside when I fold 7-6 suited before the flop, but this is what good poker is. You make the right plays. This guy's opening to 3x, which is a little bigger than you ought to, and that would never raise an eyebrow in a live game, but it's interesting to see in online. It'd be like my first clue that the guy might be bad. And that seems like a really small thing. It is a really small thing. Okay, this hand is something I can call from in position. This guy should have a bunch of bluffs, and my hand has good playability. So I'm going to call. He re-raised to a good size. That's the size I would use. And now it's tricky because a lot of his raising hands have an ace in them. And he checks, which is also reasonable. I'm just going to check back. My hand is definitely category 2. And I'm going to call one street. He checked again. It's kind of interesting. It usually means he has like some showdown value. Because why wouldn't you bluff if your opponent has shown as much weakness as I have shown? Not a good card for me. I do have the jack blocker to the straight. It's a little unusual he would bet here. Don't see this line as a bluff very often. I think it's more likely he has a hand like kings. It makes sense to play this way. So I'm just going to let my hand go. I'm tempted to call anytime I'm getting a decent price. Okay, ace-jack offsuit against the... This is just barely a fold. This is really close. Ace-queen is a re-raise, and according to the chart, ace-jack offsuit is a fold. So it's pretty close. Okay, to finish my point, so this idea is you have one bet size on the flop and turn, depending on the texture. And then you just have to decide, do I bet or not? But on the river, you need 2 bet sizes. You need a small bet and a big bet. And especially out of position, you want to have what's called a block size. A blocking bet is where it's like this idea that I bet to make it less likely that I have to face a big bet. Like if I check, they're probably and they bet, they're probably going to bet big a lot of the time, and I don't want to see that. And if I bet small, they'll call pretty often and they won't raise as often. That's the theory. And so your block bet is like either a quarter pot or a third pot. That's like as big as it gets. And you basically have to mix in. You mostly have medium weak hands that don't want to get raised but can get a little value. Okay, I'm going to fold this. It's pretty close. Like I said, these offsuit aces, it's too likely against 2 opponents that you're dominated. So the blocking bet is mostly medium hands that don't want to get raised and a few strong hands that are trying to induce a raise. And that's what my bet with a flush was all the way back when I flopped a gut shot and a flush draw, turned top pair, river to flush, and my opponent had checked the whole way. I had bet small one time. Now I bet small again, and there's a decent argument for him to want to see that as weakness and raise the river as a bluff, and that's what I was hoping for. But just so I could call. I just thought that is the most likely. I thought it's more likely that I get like $9 into the pot ahead by doing it that way, by getting him to put the $9 in with some bluffs, than it is if I just bet $9 and he has to call a big bet. He doesn't look very strong so far, and so I didn't think it was too likely he would call $9. Also, if I bet $9 and I got raised to $30, I wouldn't like it anymore. And so So that was an all around kind of obvious play. And generally, when you so your big bets on the river are your nutted hands, your very strong hands, and bluffs that have a blocker to those very strong hands. So like on the river, if there's a flush possible, there's a spade flush possible, my big bets would be my flushes, and my bluffs for the big size would be the ace of spades without a hand, or maybe the king of spades without a hand. And then my small bets for value would be anything I wanted to value bet that was less than a flush. So if there was a straight that I had, or two pair or something like that, I would value bet the small size, like a third pot. And my bluffs would be really weak hands that can get that can benefit if like a medium or weak hand folds. I wouldn't have very many bluffs. When you bet a small size, you don't bluff very often. And I would have a few strong hands that would be like low flushes, non-nut flushes. I would bet small and then be planning to always call a raise with that hand. Anyway, and then the other hands, like when I make the blocking bet, if I get raised big, I just basically fold. So that's the basic strategy. And so like your small bet should be like a third or quarter pot out of position on the river, and your big bet should be like pot, like quite big. It could even be like a little bigger than pot. And in position, both your bets are going to be a little bigger because you're betting after facing a check. So your opponent has a more capped range. They're as less likely to have a really strong hand. Okay, this hand is a call, and hands like this can also squeeze sometimes. Re-raise as a bluff. This is tricky. I have a backdoor flush draw and a backdoor straight draw, and the bet is very small, but it is three-handed. I know it looks like this hand just completely sucks, and it does, but I'm getting a very good price. Now I turned a flush, and it's kind of interesting. I would have considered a bluff there. I'm not going to bluff here. My hand has some good qualities for a bluff. It's the main reason I'm not bluffing is because it's fairly likely at least one of my opponents has it. As you can see, I would have won this. But I had that missed flush draw that I want my opponents to have, although in this case that would have been more like the diamond flush draw. So two diamonds would be a bad hand to bluff with. The two spades is not too bad. Anyway, I'm in the weeds a little bit about that, but out of position on the river, a very small bet and a pot size bet should be your two choices. And in position, half pot and either pot or small over bet, like 1.25 times the pot, would be your two bet choices. Okay, this hand obviously opens the button. I was getting ready to 3-bet anybody who came into the pot. And if I get 3-bet, I'm definitely going to get 3-bet by the big blind, I would just call. Okay? So this hand is right on the border of category 1 and 2. And I'm going to bet it because I want hands like King 10 to fold, and they will. And now, like on the turn, I'm just not going to bet. I'm going to check. And that way, if this, like, I think if this guy has a 7, he'll mostly fold when I bet the turn. I don't want a 7 to fold. He'll never fold a jack. That queen is not a very dangerous card because it's not, I bet the flop. So he's representing a jack or something, but there should be lots of like bluffs that he would have here. So I have an easy call getting, almost 3-1. And you can see he had a missed draw. So that's how you get value. Now that hand may not have folded. That honestly, if I bet that turn, it's possible I would get check raised, and that would have been a very difficult spot. Either have to. I probably would not fold, and then on the river, if he bluffed again, I'd have a hard decision. Probably fold. So that's the other benefit. That's what they mean when they say pot control. You keep the pot small enough that the bets are manageable and you can reasonably call with mediocre hands like I had. And so I had a close decision between checking back on the flop or betting, but I put the hand right in category 2 and decided I'm not going to bet all 3 streets here. That wasn't right away. I knew this hand's not good enough, and the hand that's basically good enough is something like King Jack to start betting at all 3 streets. And if I had bet King Jack, then on the turn when that queen came, now I no longer had a hand that could bet 2 more streets for value because of that queen. It's hard to get called by worse than second pair. 2 more bets. So it's very common. I mean, you must be familiar with this idea of checking behind, not because you don't think you have the best hand, but because it makes sense for 1 more bet to go into the pot and you be ahead as opposed to more than that. And then it's pretty questionable. And let's look at what bet size this guy used on the river too. I feel like he didn't use either the small bet or the big bet. He used something in between, which is mainly just wrong. He also bluffed with a missed flush draw, which is I don't know why the hand's not. Yeah, this wasn't working. There we go. So on the river, there's $11, and he bets half pot, or like 60% pot or something. Yeah, about 60% pot. It's very common, but it's not a good it's not a good size. As you could see, I had a very mediocre hand. This is the kind of hand he might want to target to bluff out. Something worse than a jack is what he's trying to get to fold. But he's giving me really good pot odds, and there's lots of doubt as to whether he has a good hand. He hasn't shown himself to have a good hand yet. So getting almost 3-1, I have a pretty easy call with a lot of medium with like almost any pair. And So he should have made it harder on me by betting the full pot there. Or he could make it harder on me in a different way by betting very small and not having very many bluffs. Then if he's betting like a jack there, he can bet super small and offer me really good pot odds to call, and then it's hard for me to fold like pocket fives or whatever, like a pretty bad hand. So either a small or quite big bet are what you want to use on the river, and you want to kind of know why you're doing that, and it's because if you bet big, your range is very polar. It's very strong hands and bluffs. And then if you bet small, your hand is mostly medium strength hands with a few monsters and a few bluffs. So if you bet big, it's a lot of monsters and a lot of bluffs. All right, how long we got here? 31 minutes. Yeah, this is another good place to stop. And I think it's probably good just to stop. Period. Okay, yeah. Hopefully that helps with the buckets and stuff. See you next time.